It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
Welcome back, everyone. Another great episode on Beneath the Helmet. Today, I'm joined with a fellow from across the globe, coming in from Australia this morning. We have author Bill Carson joining us. So Bill just published a book called Safe Conversations at Work, geared towards management, on how to have safe conversations that allow people to express themselves in a genuine, vulnerable, authentic way. What I loved about our conversation was the topic about empathy and sympathy and how the two are quite different, but how we mix and maybe choose the wrong one occasionally on how to react. So in this episode, we talk a bit about grief and how he came through a lot of younger childhood grief to where he is today, thriving. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Bill Carson as he shares some of his nuggets and his learnings on how to have safe conversations with your employees, but also with your family, your kids, your partner. So sit back, enjoy the show. Stay well. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Beneath the Helmet. Got another very special guest today. I got Bill Carson coming in across the world. Another one of our great colleagues in Australia. He's located in Sydney, Australia. So welcome to the show, Bill, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you very much, Arjuna. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. So, Bill, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you came from, and maybe how you came to writing this important book that we're going to dig into today.
Yes. Okay. So working backwards from just having recently written and published Safe Conversations for Work and Life. This book has come out of a lot of work that I've done with leaders, managers in businesses, and it's really valuable for people generally, because often managers have team members who are struggling. We all do, for one reason or another, if there are life circumstances that happen to us, and often the managers don't know how to have the conversation. They don't know how to see how someone might be struggling. Often it's interpreted as a performance issue. And so often manager brain wants to try to solve the problem, tell the person what to do. And that's just, really not the most effective way. Sometimes they don't know what to say, they don't make it worse or think that they might. So Safe Conversations is all about that. And it's also incredibly useful for a lot of men who find themselves in a situation where they've often had it said to them, "You're not listening to me." Like, well, hang on, I care about you, I love you, and I want to solve your problems. So I've done a lot of mental health first aid workshops in corporate, and now nearly 700 hours of lifeline telephone crisis support. I started about 7 years ago when I come through a difficult patch, and then I wanted to give my gifts back to others. Prior to that, I've been doing a lot of corporate training, education, leadership, and sales service, service. And then prior to that, I have a science degree. I majored in metallurgy at Melbourne University. Then there's life before that.
Have you always lived in Australia? Is that or have you lived anywhere else?
Yes.
Yeah. Nice. Beautiful country. Beautiful country. So I'd love to hear a bit about why you wrote this book. Like, why is it important to you that you wrote this book? I know there's some personal stories that revolve around the why. Maybe if you could share some of those.
Yeah. So specifically the why is, as I was touching on earlier, I think that for me personally, while I was working in corporate and specifically having bosses working for me, I've been in my own business now in the early 2000s. Then I had a stint where I go back and sort of have a formal job for a while. I never had the experience where a manager ever had a "How's Bill going?" conversation. And I think this is an incredibly um, missed opportunity for managers to be able to do that, particularly more and more as we're expecting that work is more of a community of people experience working together for a common outcome rather than the old militaristic bureaucratic environments that we've been working in. So right there and then, to have if I was managing you, to have how's Arjuna going conversation where I'm interested in you and the humanity of who you are being working in my team, separate from Arjuna, the person who does tasks. And a lot of managers have no ability to manage those conversations because it takes a lot of personal maturity, number one. But it also just, a lot of managers don't want to go there because they think they'll get into the personal stuff. But just asking me about how I am and how I'm traveling. And if, let's say, there are some things that are kind of a little bit difficult for me, then in the book, I'm not teaching the managers to be therapists, but it's really helping the person that you're having a conversation with, team member, to develop their own self-awareness around what might be going on with them, and then to help them to access resources that would be most suitable. And there's essentially two levels of resources. There's the self-care resources, just, going for a walk in the park, jumping on your motorbike and going for a spin, reaching out to friends, those kind of what I call level one resources where we look after ourselves. And then level two resources is, as we often hear with the physical body, if symptoms persist, please see your healthcare professional. So if someone's struggling mentally and emotionally with stuff, then to connect in with a professional. So I have a really strong passion and interest that we be much more aware, kind, compassionate, and that can exist in the workplace in a really appropriate kind of way without feeling that, you're being too soft or people are going to take advantage of. And I'll just kind of share this example as well, Arjuna, because with your background in first responder environment, but in Lifeline, it's incredibly important for us to look after our self-care, for our emotional well-being. And one of the things I talk about is when we do the work, for example, Lifeline, it is highest level of empathy, which is what I call compassionate empathy, because the two lower levels of empathy is first of all cognitive empathy, then emotional empathy, and then compassionate empathy. So when you're doing the work of empathy, and when you do the work of empathy, we get impacted. There's an energy transfer. There's a thing really present with someone when they're really struggling. So at the end of that call, if I've had a caller who's been quite either emotionally triggering for me or professionally, technically, do I really handle that in the most effective way? Doesn't happen for me much these days, but in the early years, I could, at the end of the call, take off the headset, go into the next room and talk to the supervisor so I could debrief and just share my feelings. And generally, most of the time, the supervisor very, very good, and just an opportunity to emotionally regulate some ideas and some thoughts and so forth. What I've found from that is that I have become so much stronger emotionally, what I call mental and emotional fitness. And I think that's incredibly important that everybody on the planet needs to improve their mental and emotional fitness. And I recall I was a few months ago, late last year, actually, I was running a mental health first aid workshop, and a guy in the course had previously been in police force. And he said it was incredibly traumatic vast numbers of times in the police force because it could never be talked about. There's this incredible, massive misnomer, misunderstanding that if we talk about our feelings, then we are being weak and we will weaken ourselves. But the total opposite is true. It's incredibly important to be able to connect with our feelings, talk about our feelings, have someone who listens to us, validates us, and there's a somewhat counterintuitive, a healing that actually comes from it. And it's a bit similar to the way I think about it. Imagine a young child or even an adult, but particularly in a young child. The young child fell over and hurt themselves. Then a really appropriate caregiver, parent way of helping that child is just to hold them. And then what will happen is that they settle down, they get regulated, the way we are as humans, when we're held and we're loved, then their little brain emotionally regulate and they'd respond with, I'm good now, daddy or mummy, and off they go. And we can do that as adults by holding the space, care, safety, and love. You don't even have to go into the whole love thing. It's just this holding a sense of safety for someone to talk about how they're feeling and not have any judgment around it. That's the biggie.
I would agree. Yeah. Empathy, no judgment, just listening ear. We're humans. We all have emotions. We all have, like, every single person has an emotion, emotions that we need to feel. We can't hide those any longer, right? So even in the industry like the fire rescue or police services, those are just as important. It doesn't mean that, and I personally don't like the term soft skills, because I think some of those are the hardest skills to do, is to be that way, showing up vulnerable, 100% yourself each day and feeling and expressing how you want to feel, right? And I've kind of been my journey in the last couple of years is experiencing that, because I definitely didn't experience that as an individual myself. And it's so freeing to be your genuine self 24/7. It's an amazing feeling. So I know growing up for you, that you had lots of trauma and kind of tough challenges going up. Is that kind of what sparked your interest into the mental health world and things like that? Or how would you describe your kind of entry into this industry of
Mm.
mental health?
Yeah. No, big, significant former experience for me at the age of 5 was losing my dad. Died in a car accident. And, my dad was 29, my mum was 26. And so you can imagine a woman, 26, 4 kids.
Mm.
I was the eldest of 5. The youngest by that time he was 9 months. And she loses her husband and the incredible trauma from that. And my experience was the police came Sunday morning, police came, and I just went down the back of the house and I just, went in deep pain, and that stayed with me for an incredibly long period of time. And I have no recollection of my mother ever coming and holding me in my grief. And this is a major challenge and issue for a lot of people on the planet. Is when we have significant grief experience, loss experiences, if we don't get to learn to move through that grief, to actually have it healed. And vast numbers of significant mental health challenges and significant correlations of loss experiences with depression is highly correlated with the fact that we don't get professional help when we have these significant loss experiences. So the equivalent I often talk about is we break a body part. Like when I busted 2018, I busted my right knee in a surfing accident, and tore the ACL, the MCL, the meniscus, etc. And I was in a lot of pain. And so what did I do? I went to the doctor, of course, and then I got an MRI scan, found out what the situation was, and then a whole rehab process with physio and exercise specialists to get better. And when we have the same as when we experience mental emotional injuries, when we have like divorces, and nearly lost relation, emotional breakup, or lose someone very, very close, they're really deep emotional pain, injuries that need professional help. But most of it all around the world, like You just try to get by yourself. If you're still struggling with it 2 or 3 months later, haven't you got over that yet and moved on? And it needs professional help. So what then informed, so this stayed in the system for me. And when I was at uni, I had this sense of, teaching and psychology that at the time, for a whole raft of reasons, I didn't choose to do it then. And then when I was working as a manager, I was always interested in people aspects more than the technical bits. And then when I went through a difficult patch around 2014, 2015, I had some work stuff that kind of didn't go too well. And I have an internalizing stress reaction style, which is to blame myself. And then I eventually got through it, and there's a real story there. And I then decided to give it my gifts, because I always wanted to be able to do this. And that's when I started doing the Lifeline volunteer telephone across for work. And then a few months after that, a friend reached out and asked if I'd help him deliver mental health first aid workshops. I do more workshops. And then it's sort of really snowballed from there. And, doing additional one-on-one work and group work, those sorts of things. So inherently, Arjuna, I think it's, some of us just have that desire and propensity to want to, work with others and to help others. So it's in the system. And then having essentially then my own experience. And then I'm like the scientist of my own experience. And so I learn things, and then I apply them to myself. And then I know that's, sample size of one. And then but I'm pulling lots and lots of research. You can see, how much I read and listen to, that I'm aiming to experiment myself. Some things work for me, some things don't. And then same in working with other people as well. Some things work, some things don't. And this is where it's really important for people to be, look after their own self-efficacy. And that is, you go to one doctor and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. So your doctors will specialize in particular areas. So if you don't like that doctor, that psychologist, or that helpline person you spoke to, then go to another one. It's so important that we do that.
100%. Yeah, I think it's important work, and I think I personally believe my story is a gift to where I am today. The headaches, the pain, whatever that went through, I feel it was a gift, and I'm kind of sensing that from you, that sure, horrible situations you had as a child growing up that led all into your adult life, but I'm sensing that you kind of are embracing it as a gift now. Am I on the right page?
Yeah, exactly. And it's really, it's an incredibly important thing. One of the things that I teach, I run in fact, I just did on Friday, a 1 hour keynote on what I call taming the stress and burnout monster.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the really important themes that I touch on that can help people be just so much more aware and potentially contribute to less burnout is this fundamental habit that we often have. So I ask the question, if you've got 10 things to get done in a day, you start your day and you got 10 things you got to get done, and you only get 6 done, what do we tend to focus on? Well, the 4 that we didn't get done, and then so that just takes us into what I call DHD, the don't have this D. So, I didn't get that done. I should have, and, etc. Whereas if we focus on the 6 we did get done, then I call this distinction the gap and the gain, or the pain and the gain. When we focus on what we don't have, it causes emotional pain. So we focus on the gain, and then I've made an acronym out of gain, which is gratitude, appreciation, inspiration, and nurture. And so, you just see numerous stories, and it's an incredible part of the human condition that when we shift our awareness to focusing on what we do have rather than what we don't have, then there's just an enormous amount of research and a personal experience that will identify a different experience. And in fact, brain chemistry, which, brain produces the neurotransmitters and the chemistry that goes into the bloodstream, which then flows into the rest of the body. And this is Bruce Lipton's work. If we focus on what we don't have, then that fundamentally stresses us, and then we produce stress chemicals, cortisol, adrenaline, acetylcholine, et cetera, which then floats into all the body parts and accumulates in areas of inherent weakness, and then just makes it weaker. But if we focus on what we do have and have gratitude and appreciation, even, and then start thinking about, okay, I can do this, what else can I do? And then we nurture ourselves. Then we produce and put good chemicals in, like the oxytocins and the serotonins and the dopamines, et cetera, into our system. So coming back to your question there and your point, Arjuna, that difficult life experiences, they really are difficult. And the capacity to be able to look for and notice the positives that we do have in our lives is incredibly important. It can be seen sometimes as, just being, Pollyanna-ish and, you're not facing up to reality. But here's the thing that again, this is massively supported by the research. When we do learn to really access positive resources, classic cognitive reframing, positive reframing, classic sort of cognitive behavioral therapy methods, acceptance and commitment therapy methods. When we access those and use those, we actually then have more brain capacity. It actually has us use a lot more of our right hemisphere, which then gives us greater brain capacity to deal with the difficult experience that we're dealing with. Put a Band-Aid on it, but to actually deal with the complexity of it.
Beautiful. I'm a big fan of neuroscience now. It's kind of a new thing for me as well, and just learning how the body operates. I think it's so important for everyone to take some time and understand how your individual body operates, because everyone's a little bit different, but there's a lot of commonalities. And I just think most of our time we go through life just go, and we don't necessarily sit down and kind of contemplate and do an inventory of our own. What triggers us? What sensations do we feel when we're stressed? I think the power of gratitude it's powerful. Gratitude and forgiveness is one of the two practices that I've been working on the last couple of years, is just letting go of things that kind of irked me in the past or made me angry or frustrated, letting those go and having gratitude for the wonderful things that are in my life. Right. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's life-changing, to your listeners, as I've shared with a lot of people, and I did this experiment myself a few years ago. I was kind of in a grumpy phase and heard about this and knew about this research and this whole methodology of gratitude. So I started doing 3G, 3 gratitudes a day, and just, decided to write it down so you can get a book, a piece of paper, whatever works. And at the end of the day, started writing it down, things I'm grateful for. And it starts off being really basic, that the sun's shining, I've got a roof over my head, etc. And then start to get a bit deeper. And I found that after about a good 2 to 3 weeks, I was really starting to notice a shift in my overall mood level. Because moods are the combination of thoughts and feelings. So when we start to raise up our mood level, then it's better. So yeah, definitely works. And then the combination of gratitude and forgiveness aligns to kind of a methodology that I have find incredibly valuable that I call R&R. So receive and release, receive and release. And, just imagine kind of receiving, coming in sort of through the top of my head and then sort of releasing down through my body into the earth. So you receive gratitude, release forgiveness. And forgiveness is a really interesting thing because a lot of people go, "Oh, I don't want to forgive them," and forgiveness is very much an intention as distinct from actually going to the person and saying, "Forgive." It's incredibly difficult to do that, or it's just reality of life. However, when we do the intention of forgiveness, the energetic, in a sense, desire, where as hard as it is, I'm feeling so much hurt, so much anger, they deserve, etc., etc. If we just decide to kind of do something different, just to experiment and see what happens, then making that intention, just thinking the thought or saying it to the sky, writing it down, whatever, just it has that change effect. It's worth experimenting.
Yeah, I love the R&R. That's a very simple way to remember that simple method, right? But also, for me, I think dropping that and forgiving somebody drops the weight from my shoulders. Sure, whatever they did is still there. Whatever happened between the two parties is still there, but you don't have to carry that weight any longer. I think that's, for me, that was the key, that frustration, that anger towards whoever that was or that situation is no longer on my shoulders, which I think is pretty powerful.
I'll just say this, it's challenging, but it's just poisonous. And it's so destructive. I mean, look what's happening in the Middle East. They just can't with each other. And it's difficult. It's like, I'm not taking sides here, but there has to be capacity for higher level thinking. Albert Einstein said many, many years ago, amongst many brilliant human things that one of the humans said, he said, you can't solve problems with the same level of thinking at which the problem was created. Can't solve problems with the same level of created. So if you try to solve fairly complex problems with the same level of thinking, which is an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and revenge, then it will just perpetrate itself. There has to be higher order thinking.
Yep, just keep going and going and going.
Incredibly complex, and it's really tough. And then we see major change being made by people like the Nelson Mandelas of the world. He had to go through 28 years prison to kind of heal his anger and his forgiveness, release it. Mahatma Gandhi had to do a lot of work as well. So, really higher order thinking and commitment for us all. And, if we want peace on the planet, it's about finding peace in ourselves. I mean, I learned this years ago and I thought, oh, yeah, that's thinking. As I create a sense of peace in myself, then I can be really kind and loving in my partner Leanne, and raise good son in my son Richard. He's pretty peaceful kind of guy. It flows out into the people that I interact with, and you go on from there. You're holding unforgiveness. One finger there. There's one finger up there, which is the. And there's three pointing back.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think it's contagious when you start acting like that in your own awareness, your own self-leadership. It's contagious. People around you will start to feel that energy and how you're kind of portraying and showing up in the world, right? So I'd love to explore your book that's just coming out. So Safe Conversations for Work and Life. Um,
Mm.
I think it's an important topic for me. I think communication is always a factor in issues and conflict in leadership style, management. Communication is always a factor. But I love how you kind of craft this as it supports mental health. Meaningful, safe
Mm.
community conversations support mental health. So maybe just kind of give us a little overview of this book and of who's the reader, who's supposed to be looking at this, and why is it going to make a difference in our organizations?
Yep. So it is very, very, it's targeted specifically at managers, and then broadly, generally in the organization. And as an example, there's a client that I'm working with this very soon in the next weeks. And what they've seen is that if we empower our managers to be able to notice the signs where team members might be struggling or with our peers, and then be able to have a safe conversation for that person, to help them develop their own self-awareness, then we're increasing the culture of us as an organization to be able to support, look after each other. Now, the critical thing there in looking after, sometimes some managers get a little bit jaundiced, like, oh, here we go, I've got to, hand hold them, be soft on them and things like that. No, no, you don't. It's about the capacity to improve one's empathy skills, because empathy is about them. Empathy, them, pathy. The pathy is feelings. That's a Greek word. Pathos is word for feelings. So pathos is pathy is feelings. So them feelings. Whereas when we do sympathy, the way I think about sympathy is we do self feeling. And a lot of managers can make a mistake, and this happens broadly in life as well. A lot of males tend to do it, and sometimes females with each other, is if we're not aware of it, you will see someone in the team who are maybe struggling a little bit. And often there's some potential frustration with that, or we're kind of consciously feeling some degree of what they might be going through. And if you don't have the awareness, then we do self-pity, which is we go into our own feeling, and then we project. We essentially tell the person what to do, because out of our own feelings, we're wanting to upload and tell the person what to do, etc. So the good, really, really effective skill here is the ability to notice our own feelings, just settle them down, and reflect the feelings of the other person. So if you and I were having a conversation, and you might have mentioned, that if I kind of connected in and, how you're traveling, how things going, and how are you feeling, so there was that sense of safety and trust that you felt that you could open up with me because I'm safe to talk to. Then what I'm going to say, oh, look, I'm a bit worried about dad at the moment. He's just unwell, and, and having to spend more time with him, and that's a bit of pressure on the family. So things are a little bit unstable. I'm not going to then by that, judge you or try to solve your problem. I'd be asking then, and in a safe conversations way, have you got support and resources to help you through what you're going through? And you'd say, yeah, look, my brother's helping me a little bit. Guess I probably need maybe a little other help to look after myself a bit. And then I'd say, look, we're available in some shape or form, but, you've also got access to our assistance provider service, things like that as well. All right. And then you might ask, is there a need potentially for any adjustments in your workload at the moment? So, so the key theme I'm making there is that a manager doesn't lead with the what can I do for you straight away, but it's encouraging the person to access their own resources. And then if there is a need for additional support or guidance around that, then they can do that. So safe conversations is essentially the S is the self-awareness. So if I'm in a grumpy state and if, maybe not or feeling a little bit depleted, it's not really a good time for me to have this type of conversation. Better to a better time. The A is around acknowledging, which is reflecting feelings of the other person, and then knowing what questions might be appropriate to ask, which is the examples of using a gentle you rather than I. That's a big distinction a lot of people get because they manager brain goes into, what can I do for you and making it all about I. And then the F is focused on listening. All right. So the subtlety of just being present with the other person's feelings, reflecting feelings, doing good listening skills in that. And then the E is empower and empowering in an appropriate kind of way, not you'll be all right, off you go, mate. Not that kind of inauthentic way, but a way of kind of reflecting back where it be appropriate, some aspect of, I might be saying something. If I notice, for example, that you were like quite a caring kind of guy, I just say, look, you're really caring kind of guy. You obviously love your dad. You're concerned about him. Just make sure you're caring for yourself and, balancing out, that's for you. So it's a skill set. The workshop, the book is essentially shortened version of 3-hour workshop, what I teach or MLO, which is essentially about an hour and a half teaching around mental health awareness, and then about an hour and a half focusing on how to actually have a conversation that I was just.
I love to hear how you define empathy, because I think people can sometimes construe empathy and sympathy together and kind of mix them up. How would you describe, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to hear just your definition of empathy.
So I just go back to that definition for a start between empathy and sympathy. So empathy is them feeling. So it's noticing the feelings of the other person, so being present with that. And then sympathy is self-feeling. So we get caught up in our own feeling. And then empathy is one of the models that I've seen, which tends to make sense to me, is at 3 levels. So there's cognitive empathy. So let's say, for example, 12 months ago, there was a program on one of the channels that I watched, which was the experience of people leaving war-torn countries and coming to Australia. So I don't have that personal experience, but cognitively, I could empathize with what that would be like. The next level is emotional empathy. And this is where we feel what the other person is feeling. And as human beings, we're very emotionally connected, because we can either feel positive emotions, feelings, or negative feelings as well. So we're often going to be doing emotional empathy with our partners, and then our children, close friends, etc. Workmates, police, and then compassionate empathy. Highest level of empathy is when we actually do the work of empathy, which means that you're actually being with. So this is what compassion is. Is the Latin word for with, and passion is pain. When we're with someone and doing the work of empathy, then that's at high level. Highest level. The thing that's really important for people to be mindful of when they're, when we're doing that, when we have safe conversation, when someone might be struggling, and we give ourselves the willingness or the interest or the capability to actually be with their pain. And when we do it well, we're actually, not taking it on, telling them what to do, but we're reflecting back their feelings. We're creating that, in a sense, that safe platform of validation and listening to. The thing that we've got to be so careful of, this is where a lot of people struggle a bit, is that we will, when you do compassionate, we will experience and take on some of those feelings. And so it's so important that we self-care. So let's say if there was just some kind of minor things going on, we go back to that conversation with you and your dad is not well, then I'll have a little bit of residual feelings, and then I could probably go from that conversation and just get straight into work, doing emails, making a phone call, etc. But if the feelings are more intense, then it's really important that we recognize, well, thinking more about what's going on with Arjuna and maybe, a little bit worried about it or frustrated with it, whatever. Then it's really important that we remove those feelings in some shape or form. Might be to go for a walk or conversation. But if they're hanging around a little bit more, might be then to be important to talk to somebody, employee assistance provider. So the key theme here is that where a lot of people, particularly managers and others, will stay away from and not want to connect emotionally with another person. And the reason is because they know that that person's feelings are something that they feel, and they don't want to go there because they don't know how to handle their feelings. Then we recognize that that's okay, that's natural, and you can look after yourself by dealing with your own feelings. You don't have to manage your own feelings by imposing them on the other person and telling them. Now, I'll just, while I've got the microphone, I'll just share one thing that's a real challenge for a lot of often men, Jeff. Men who, often told, you're not listening to me. What will happen is, their partner, let's say, will say something like, I'm frustrated, how are you doing? Oh, God, I had a frustrating day today and the kids have just got me crazy. And, at work, Derek, my boss, did his more stuff. Now, what will happen is male brain often will hear that and often get triggered at the level of emotional empathy, feel the feelings to a degree. We'll hear it, process it, and often, because I care about you and love you, then tell their partner what to do. It just seems like a natural thing. I've heard it, and I care about you and I want to help solve your problem. So I'll tell you what to do. And then the response is, you're not listening to me. Anyway, I heard what you said, care about you and what you should do. And so this is where it's so important that the male brain recognizes the distinction between empathy and sympathy, because the male brain goes into self-empathy, self-feelings. So the male brain has feelings because they care about the other person. And then they think that it's appropriate to then to project their own feelings onto the other person. No. Notice your feelings. Yep, you are caring. Just hold them and just reflect back the other person's feeling. Now, it seems really counterintuitive. It's like, hang on, I'm not solving their problem. I'm not telling them what to do. No. This is not to do that. Notice your feelings, stay present with them, reflect back the other person's feelings and say something like, it must be really frustrating for you, darling. What did you end up doing? Like, how are you feeling? How did you handle it? And staying really present with the other person, trying to tell them. And now say, oh, look, I tried this, I did that. And again, just letting them be in their own space of their own feelings and not trying to tell them what to do. Again, seems incredibly counterintuitive, but that's what really good listening does.
Well, it kind of goes back to your point about empowering as well. That goes back to empowering. When you're there to just reflect back to them, you're empowering them to make their own decision, maybe, or come to their own conclusion, And I definitely had issues with this, through my career. But when I went through Royal Roads into the coaching program, it really opened my eyes up to not bring solutions to every conversation, to just listen and be there with them instead of, here's how to do it. I know how to do it. That's all that does is backfire and turn that safe place into not a safe place anymore. So
Mm, exactly. And that's the whole theme of safety and the incredible importance around safe conversation is for each of us. Are you safe to talk to? Because when we're not safe to talk to, we are want to tell the other person what to do, imposing our judgments. We all need to be safe to talk to.
yeah, basic human need. Are there any
Yeah.
do's and don'ts around safe conversations?
Yes. So do's such as the things that we've been talking about, which is, when people say, listen, okay, what does that mean specifically? Well, one of the big things is all the thoughts, judgments, perspectives, all that kind of stuff that we have going on in our head. Settle it down. Just like recognize it exists and then reflect back. So do is reflecting feelings. Uh, do empowering, do of choosing an appropriate time to have the conversation, walk, grab a coffee. Guys offering really good guys to go for a walk. I've been driving in the car with, a teenager. So a really good example of use of safe conversations is parents have got to often realize that their brain, the brain of a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old is massively different to the brain of a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old. And so when adults impose their 50-year-old brain or 40-year-old brain onto their teenagers, it's really, really to kids. And often, because adults, they're really loving and they really want to help, but they're coming from sympathy or self feelings and they're projecting their self feelings onto their child instead of inviting the child to talk about what's going on for them. Oh, look, I'm being bullied at school. Okay. Well, that's terrible. Who do I need to talk to? Okay, tell me what's happening. How are you feeling about it? What do you think's going on? Potentially triggering it. And parent brain just needs to settle down. Like they're trying to solve the problem. It's about being really present with the child's experience and helping you figure out ways in which they can work their way through it themselves. Does that make sense?
For sure. Yeah, I was just curious if there's language that's maybe going back to the conversation that we had prior to this was about trauma informed language. And if there's
Mhm.
words that are, upsetting to the conversation to make it unsafe all of a sudden.
Yeah, absolutely. Language is always a part of that, and often the things that creates the unsafety is where one person is imposing, judging in some shape or form the other, that inviting, coming coming from a place of curiosity and an interest in sort of wanting to understand. Then the don'ts are, yeah, we've kind of covered them. Don't impose on the other person. Don't try to tell them what to do. Don't be inauthentic in the whole process. Don't even think that you can't do it because with um, learning and education, one can do it. And it's really important to understand that it doesn't mean that all our other skills as a manager aren't useful because all those task skills, everything we know is important. This is expanding out our skill set for the challenging context of noticing where someone might be struggling and then being able to appropriately, gently, respectfully lean into having a conversation to help them create their own self-awareness, to be responsible for themselves.
I know this is a tough subject for a lot of people to talk about, but I think the word and the subject of suicide, I think, is something that in the first responder world, we are starting to embrace the word more of it's okay to say that word. It's not the S word anymore. Because we need to talk about it. We need to have that dialogue and we need to be open so people trust us to come and talk to us. So I'd love to hear how, if a firefighter was coming to you, if you were the fire chief or whatever that looks like, and there was a conversation around suicide, how would you show up for that person to make it safe?
Yeah, this is one of the other areas that I teach on conversations about the suicide. And so there's one of the fundamental themes to understand and just clarify, Arjuna, is this, that the person themselves potentially is having suicidal
Mhm.
thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So first of all, it's essentially their capacity to kind of recognize what could be contributing, why a person might be having suicidal thoughts. And this is one of the things a lot of people don't understand. And that is that it's suicidal thoughts start to get correlated with someone who's having significant loss experience. And there's actually been often a number of, and also with existing underlying trauma. You have relationship breakup, access to the kids, another significant other in life dies. So this is then becoming really difficult. A person starts to spiral down into a place of thoughts go to initially, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, and then let's go to the place of it's not worth me living any. And so it's a very complex topic. And first of all, we need to have the radar up and noticing if someone might be having a lot of loss experiences and potentially going into that place. And then one of the things that I teach in my workshop, how to actually ask the question properly to connect in. Because most people don't ask it properly. They ask it in a very blaming or shaming kind of way. So it's got to be asked very appropriately by setting context and valid normalizing their situation, and then asking the question, and then exploring what to do after that. My view is that every parent of a teenager on the planet, every secondary school teacher, every manager needs to be taught in this area, needs to be taught what to notice, what would be the signs that someone would be struggling, and then to be able to have, compassionate person-centered conversation. Because a lot of people just don't understand. If they've got what I call a blamer style, they just think that anyone who has suicidal thoughts is a selfish person, and they have no understanding of what a person is going.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's an important conversation that has to go well. And you need to be prepared for having those conversations. So to the listeners, it's just educating yourself on how to handle those situations. So when the time does come, which probably unfortunately that day will come, that we at least handle it in the best way.
Yeah, and it might be worthwhile for your listeners to actually have a way of doing that, because although you just might say just there, um, handling it in the best way, most people don't know how to
No,
handle it.
no.
I guess the three biggest fears is, what if they say yes, number one, or what if I put the idea into their head, or what if they get angry at me?
Mm,
That's what I teach workshop, is how to actually ask the question in a much more appropriate way.
yeah, I agree. But I'd love to give you an opportunity to share one tip that you want our listeners to walk away with today, something that's a nugget that you share with every audience and you just want our listeners to hear it today. What would that look like?
Number one is to know the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Nice.
In other words, you get caught up in your own feelings and you're trying to tell other people what to do, then that's fundamentally coming from self-feeling, self-empathy. Empathy is the ability to notice that, let go of that, and reflect feelings of the other person.
Beautiful. Well, Bill, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I really congratulate you on this book. I love the passion that you have around communication, around mental health, and the brain, and how that kind of plays into it all. And I think this is an easy read for all managers and even all levels of people, and parents potentially even.
Yes.
It's an important subject that I think needs to be shared with the world. So thanks for putting it out there. How can people learn more about you, and how can they get a copy of your book?
So first of all, on LinkedIn, Bill Carson, or my website is inspirelearning.au, inspirelearning.au. And then the book is available on Amazon, Safe Conversations for Work and Life. And we'll love everybody to read it, share with me their feedback, and let's make this a movement of making it safe.
Beautiful. Love it. Great conversation. Well, Bill, I really appreciate your time, and I know it's early in the morning for you, and I think it's even October 31st, and we're October 30th here. So 2 different days on the same podcast. So that's great. I interviewed somebody, I believe he was in Perth. I'm not 100% sure, but it was the same thing. It was the end of the month in 1 month, and then it was the next month for him. I was like, that's just bizarre that it's talking in 2 different months. All right, Bill, all the best to you. Congratulations on the book, and thanks for sharing your wisdom and your insight and your stories of how you came to creating this important book. So thanks a lot, Bill. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Arjuna. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Fantastic.
What you're doing as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, everyone. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.